Hi, everybody. Shavua Tov. It is morning in Jerusalem, February 10th, 2019. The fifth day of Adar, 5779. You're listening to Eve Harrow on Rejuvenation, the Land of Israel Network. Normally, the first broadcast in the month of Adar would be a really happy broadcast because Adar is the happy month. And it's the month of Purim, which is next month, because this year we even have two Adars. But this month did not get off to a great start. And for that reason, I actually switched up what I was going to do this morning. I had a whole show planned that I'm going to push off to next week about something I did last week. And I was going to have an archaeologist on in one of my typical shows. But what happened at the end of last week was so earth-shaking for me that I said this show has to be done differently. And I was in touch with a former colleague, a friend, online commentator, Mottle Wolf, also a father, also a resident of Tekoa. So Mottle, thanks so much for joining me this morning on Land
Always a pleasure, Eve. Nice to be back speaking with you again. It's been a while.
It's been a while, and I always love talking to you.
I wish we were talking about Adar.
Exactly. I wish we were talking about Adar. I wish we were talking about Israeli elections. I wish we were talking about just about anything else. But there was a horrible murder that if you haven't heard about, I don't know where you've been, those of you who are listening to my show from all over the world, Ori Ansbacher, you look at the picture of this girl and she's so full of life. But she was brutally murdered, and I want to talk about why I'm using those words in a couple of minutes. She was brutally murdered on Thursday by I'm not like a piece of filth. I don't know how else to comment on this. Someone from Hebron who happened to be, I don't know, walking through the forest with a knife, where she was going for a walk right outside Jerusalem, near a beautiful place called En Yael, also near the Jerusalem Zoo. Any of you who are familiar, the biblical zoo, any of you who are familiar with our beautiful capital, and she was killed. So first of all, Mottle, as a resident of Tekoa, and you're the first person that I heard from when she was finally identified on Friday at who it was. So a little bit from somebody who knew her personally and not just from her picture in the paper or from knowing the family and knowing people around her. Can you tell us a little bit about Ori?
So, I mean, it's interesting here in Israel. It's such a small country. Yeah. And
one degree of separation.
Always. 1 degree of separation, and unfortunately sometimes less than that. Mm-hmm. So when something like this happens in Israel, the military releases a gag order, and no one's really allowed to talk about it until everyone could be informed. And by everybody, they mean the family of the people. And also, about 2 hours before this became public, I have two daughters in the elementary and junior high school here in Tekoa, where Ori went, where her brothers and sisters go to school, and the family is known at that school. So they pulled the school, and they had the kids deal with it before the nation itself dealt with it. Mm-hmm. So I got a crying call from my daughter, and that I should wake up my 19-year-old son who served in Bnei Akiva. Bnei Akiva is a youth group here in Israel, and I think throughout the world, a Zionist youth group.
Yeah. So I met my husband was in Bnei Akiva in Los Angeles.
Wow, yeah. Probably a different year than my son. Yeah. But my son served as a madriach, a youth counselor with Ori. So so she was advising waking him up and telling. So we dealt with this for a couple hours before it went public. I'll tell you something else interesting. Like, I knew my 13-year-old daughter had Ori as a counselor. She was her youth counselor, mm-hmm. and my son, they were counselors together.
Right.
But my 9-year-old was crying a little bit more, and I thought, maybe she's processing that you're supposed to be crying, and it was about an hour later that she finally told us the story. And no, Ori's 9-year-old sister has been in her class for 3 years, mm-hmm. and Ori took them to the park together. Mm-hmm. She's actually been in their house multiple times, and actually knew her sister probably more than the rest of us did, mm-hmm. or at least maybe more than the rest of my kids did.
Right.
And
so it's frightening.
So it hits home, and it's things kids have to deal with here that unfortunately kids do have to deal with around the world, but it just seems like our kids have to deal with it a little bit more.
So I wanted to, that's some of what I wanted to talk to you about, because I know, for example, one of the hardest things I ever had to do was to tell my oldest daughter, Elisheva, that her teacher, she was already out of high school, but her beloved high school teacher, Dina Horowitz, had been murdered at the Friday night table with her husband over Shabbat, like the news came trickling in. And over the years, things that we've had to do. And like you said, look, the world is a rough place. And I doubt that anybody listening to this podcast has not had to break it to a kid or someone that they love that, someone was tragically killed. But I wonder if there's a difference here. There are terrible things that happen all over the place. And there's, of course, car accidents and diseases and a lot of people who die young for reasons other than terror. And we sit here in Israel, though, and there's this added layer of random, horrible murder, crazy person, which is, and we don't know all the details yet. I mean, the murderer has been arrested. And it could just be that he was a deranged person, like, you have on campuses, right? I mean, girls get killed on campuses, right, all the time. But there's this added layer here of what they call nationalistic motive. This idea of that killing a Jew is like the best thing you could possibly do, more than just the crime itself or whatever sick pleasure people get out of this. There's also like killing a Jew. There's this idea, which turns it into terrorism beyond murder. So do you think that when we deal with that here, does that make it scarier for our children? Does that make it harder to rationalize, easier to rationalize? Well, it's anti-Semitism rearing its ugly head, just in a different form. Like, how do you, as a father, explain this to your kids or explain it to yourself?
It's funny. One of the things I hate the most is the rock throwing on the roads.
Right.
It's happened to me once. A car I was in, windshield right in front of me, got smashed out by someone throwing a rock.
Right.
And I was talking to my wife where she grew up in an area with a lot of deer.
Mm-hmm.
And she was like, well, we used to have that also. We used to drive and like at any second a deer could jump out. And I was like, yeah, but if the deer were planning that ahead of time, it would be more scary.
Mm-hmm.
If you knew the deer was just there going like, okay, next car that comes around that corner,
jumping in front.
Up,
yeah.
Jump out at that. So I think the intentionality of it is there's
a choice made. Somebody's making a choice to kill somebody else.
And we just, and this was part of the discussion we had at our Shabbat table over lunch. Like, my son, who's about to go in the army, was asking, he's like, because I think where it really comes down to is if you lose your kid in a school shooting in America from some like mentally ill, disturbed person just coming in and doing something that horrific there,
right.
Or if you lose your kid to the quote unquote nationalistic crime here in Israel, does one make it easier than the other? And on one hand, like Loleno, I can't imagine in a million years the pain that would accompany that, and for the rest of your life,
losing a child is losing a child.
Losing a child is losing a child.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's like if a meteor falls out of the sky and kills a person versus a person dying saving a busload of orphans.
Right.
Take two extremes in randomness and heroism on that end. We are as human beings, and I think part of the reason that the Jewish people are here, and I know that you and I are here, is that we're meaning-seeking creatures. That we are we have a life, and the truth is we're all going to die. And as I was walking through the funeral, I was walking over the open graves, the plots that have yet to be buried at in Tekoa, and kind of a sick thought, and I haven't shared it to this moment, is like I was wondering, like, is one of these mine?
Well, I mean, like, one of those hopefully will be yours at age 96, surrounded by grandchildren,
towards the end.
Right.
I hope it was one of the ones further down
Right. Yeah.
15 rows down.
Right. Right.
But nonetheless, the truth is we're all going to die. Every single person you love, every
Mm,
single person that you see. But it's not about getting to that death safely. It's
hmm
about how much meaning you can get in this world here. And I think one of the reasons I live here, because people see these stories and they see, and here's yet another teen that's been cut too short. This is too many funerals that I've been to. Yishai Fleischer, who your guests are familiar with, or
Sure.
your listeners are familiar with, I'm sure. He asked me right after the funeral. He called me and he said, "How was the funeral?" And I said, the usual.
Yeah. It's
And
so terrible.
it's so
So I
terrible.
want to, I mean, I'll put in what I think the usual means and then
But
I'll
but
ask
but
you.
but the, but the point
Yeah.
I want to get to is that what's not usual is that I think people here live a little bit more deeply, and
Mm-hmm.
we know that this can happen. That everybody knows they're going to die,
Mm,
but it seems like we're reminded about it a little bit more,
right.
and therefore we're also reminded about what are we living for.
Right. And we don't take things for granted. I mean, from the Modani prayer that I say when I open my eyes in the morning, like just thank you, God, for giving me my soul back this morning. Nothing, I'm not taking that for granted until I close my eyes at night with a Shema Yisrael. I think within that we don't have a sense of entitlement. We realize how fragile things are. But when you said the usual, so I don't know if this is how you felt, but I know that I felt this at Ari Fold's funeral. I don't know if you were there, and my listeners know it's connected to Ari through his daughter. Tamar is my daughter Neely's best friend. So this is she's getting married in a few weeks. This is like an ongoing wound that's open. But I remember looking around at the funeral, which was, and he died heroically, right? I mean, he was stabbed, but he turned around and managed to save someone else's life before and stop the teenage terrorist from continuing his rampage. But I remember looking around and thinking that I was with the finest people in the world because there was no anger. And I want to talk to you about this if this makes you fine or not. There was this tremendous sense of faith, tremendous grief, and not understanding how this could happen, but also a sense of these were people who just get it, who get what life is about, who get the meaning of life, who were going to take his murder and move it into good places, into making the world a better place in his memory. You just knew that from that point, there wasn't going to be anybody who was going into the Arab village next door on a rampage. It just was not going to happen. It wasn't going to be an excuse for violence. It was going to be an excuse to crank it up and make the world a better place. And I wasn't at Ori's funeral on Friday. I was at home preparing for Shabbat, but I was watching some of it on a live feed. And during the funeral, you could hear the muezzin calling. You could hear the call to prayer in the Arab village next door to you. So in the middle of this funeral of a beautiful girl who's slaughtered by, a Muslim fanatic, you hear the Arab call to prayer. It was obvious that nobody's going to leave that funeral and just go over to that village and say, just shut the up and that's it, and you're out of here, and you're calling to prayer for what are you praying to Allah for, and how can this be happening? It's a different, I don't know, is this a strength, Mottle? Is this a strength that we are who we are, that we are not going to let the enemy dictate our behavior? Do they see it as a weakness? We've seen that here in the Middle East, in the society and the culture that is around us, that it's not just what we do, but it's how they interpret what we do that makes a very, very big difference. So is this a strength? Is this a weakness? What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, for sure it's a strength. Look, it's this isn't going to last forever. The arc of history is moving in a particular way, and you can see it. I mean, how many Ori Ansbachers were there in Auschwitz every hour?
Right.
And when we came here to bedraggled people dragging themselves from Hitler's ovens to Israel in the 1940s, how many of these were there daily? And when we fought the wars to establish Israel every single month, and you see on Yom HaZikaron, you see those names scroll, and unfortunately I've been here in Tekoa for 8 years, And this is the second, teenager that or young woman that we've buried
Well, and
in
it's even more because
from
Kobe Mandel was, I mean, that's before you got to Tekoa, but he played
before I got
baseball
to
with my son.
Tekoa,
He
but
was also, he was stoned to death randomly by some shepherd who came upon him and Yosef Ishran, and killed them both. Also
right.
from Tekoa. So you guys have
What I
had,
but
yeah.
but to answer your question, is it is it seen as a weakness? Our strength is we are not giving up who we are, and who we are is what's going to make the difference here. Who, as a Jewish people, we have been a people of that holds itself to the highest ethical moral values, and and I understand the pulls to, like, let's just go be a little bit more like they are, but at the end of the day, the more we are like who we are, the more the world's going to become like who we are. And I want to live in a world where the people of that world are more like the people that I saw standing around that grave Erev Shabbat, that can feel something so incredibly deeply, but not have that sacrifice who they are at the end of the day. To be able to retain that your moral and ethical code when it's hard is what being strong is about. It's easy to do it when it's easy, but when it's hard, that's when it matters.
So, look, I'll go even further and say that this is how we bring God into the world, because our God is one of love and compassion. But having said that, and I agree with you about not becoming like they are, they look at us and see this as weakness. And I think that it also inspires them, if you will, to do this more, because the feeling is that, like, they would never let this happen. First of all, they kill their own daughters like this. So let's, like, just put that out there. Okay. Let alone our daughters. So we need to know what we're dealing with here. But does it, on the one hand, yes, we want this high moral, this ground, and we don't want to be changed. But on the other hand, does it mean that the next murder is going to come? Because what are we going to do? We're not going to do the death penalty. And there's a lot of people in Israel calling today for the death penalty and trying to, push Bibi or somebody in that direction. Justice Minister Ayelet Shaked did talk about that as well, that as a deterrence. I'm not so sure. I got to say that that's going to be a deterrent for people whose culture is one of yearning for death. So a death penalty may just make them a hero in their society. It's not necessarily going to stop this. There was a demonstration last night in Tel Aviv in Rabin Square, which just shows you how the nation was shocked here. This wasn't seen as like a settler girl. We have that so often, that double standard, that when people in Judea and Samaria are killed, it's like, well, what do you want from them? They're living there. They kind of deserve it. This was this entered the Israeli head in a different space. And so even in Tel Aviv, there was some kind of gathering last night. But one of the things that somebody said is, it's not fighting terror. Okay, it's fighting a culture that teaches their children, that educates their children, that this is what needs to be done. This guy he's walking through the forest with a knife. All right. He's not like looking to, I don't know, carve a log and make a little, like, necklace for his girlfriend. He's looking for a victim. He's looking for someone to kill. He's hunting. Exactly. He was a hunter, and she happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. And so, she became the hunted. But, like, do you think that, like, what do you think we could do to stop this? Just being who we are is one thing, and I'm going to hope that God looks down and says, these are still my people. This is the covenant at Sinai. These are the people that I want to be the light into the nations. Despite all that's being thrown at them, they are still holding at who the world needs them to be, to show that you can still be a human being even when surrounded by non-humans. So given all that, but on a day-to-day level, and you're a dad, and I'm a mom, and I was up at 2 a.m. picturing one of my daughters in that situation, because I can't even imagine her last moments. And as the mother of children, how do you think, there's death and there's death, but knowing that your child died in such a horrific manner should keep, all of us who, thank God that hasn't happened to, up at night. How do we stop the next one from happening? Like, where do you see us going with this on a practical level, shall we say, not a philosophical, theological level? On a practical level, how do we stop this? Can we stop this?
Well, one of the unfortunate things that I thought when I was at the funeral was this isn't going to be the last.
Right.
This isn't going to be the last time. It wasn't the first time I stood there listening to a mother wail over her child being put into the ground. And the thought that the only thing worse than that is the recognition that this isn't going to be the last time.
Right.
But the hope is that there will be a last time. And I think the problem is that,
How do we ensure? We're coming up to elections practically. What?
So there's no, I read an amazing book I want to recommend to you and to your listeners. There's a professor named Steven Pinker. And it's one of the most inspiring books I've ever read. And it's called Enlightenment Now. And he talks about just over the last, the problem is we look at news every day. If you looked at news once every 50 years, if you look at actually how much better things are now than they were 50 years ago, and how much infinitely better they were 50 years before that, but, the news doesn't show up and report on parents hugging their children at the Shabbos table. They show up and report on parents that are grieving at a Shabbos table because their daughter was butchered. Right. So it seems like it's terrible, but there is a force that's pushing forward that is making this less and less on every single metric that your chances, and this still sounds crazy because I'm standing at the funeral and there's the Mandels. They lost their son Kobe. There's a guy I know in Tekoa who his son was shot and killed at the Merkaz Rav at the high school. There's the parents of Dahlia Lemkis. And you see that,
who was also stabbed to death. Yeah,
who was run over and also nearly beheaded, and you think like this happens all the time, but the truth is we are at a moment in history where you have less of a chance of being killed by another human being than at any point in all of human history. And the reason for that is because
in the Western world,
as a whole,
okay.
In the world as a whole, there's little blips. There's a Syrian civil war. But even in, like, if you take, there are places,
Africa is
sub-Saharan Africa that are bad. But if you take all the people, the aggregate of all the people in the world, by far, your chances of being killed by another human being in war or violence or terrorism have never been more remote. And the reason is that we are becoming different people. We are instilling values that are spreading, and they're going to spread slower to certain places in the world. It's not terrible to say that a certain country is economically lagging behind other countries. That makes sense. Everybody agrees with that. But to say another country is ethically lagging behind other countries, gets called out by the political correct police. But it is true right now. The Palestinians are ethically lagging behind the rest of the world. The Middle Eastern Islamic world is ethically lagging behind. And there's no way to bomb that out of them. There's no way to death penalty that out of them, or, the only way is they have to catch up. And until they catch up, we're going to be standing over open graves of people that have been just brutally and senselessly killed.
So you're going macro. You're talking arc of history. You're talking about the Islamic world that lagging behind. Yeah, I've got other terminology, but this is a family-oriented show, so we'll go with lagging behind. Okay, I'm talking about micro. I'm talking about as a citizen of this country, of a Western country that does a very good job, I would say, by the way, of protecting its citizens. I want to say that. And I want to say that the fact that they got their hands on this thing very soon is really no small thing. I mean, the security services, be it from the army to the intelligence services to the police in this country, deserve major, major kudos. The only regret that I have is that they took him alive. All right. I mean, because he had no weapons, so they had no excuse to kill him. If he'd fought back, they would have, gotten rid of him and we wouldn't have had a discussion about the death penalty. So that's my only regret. But the fact is that I feel safer in this country, I do, than anywhere else that I've gone in the world. And I've gone to quite a few places. Okay. And a lot of that has to do with the people that are protecting us. And I want to put that out there. But what I'm talking about is we do have, as human beings, control over when you live in a democracy. And by the way, I'm not so sure that I agree with you that the people in the world are becoming better. I don't know. I wish that I thought that way. But you look around the world and you watch the news, huh?
Google
I'll read
Steven
the book.
Pinker. It'll make you
I'll
feel
read the
better.
book. No, but also a lot of times I find that people who are talking about the world are talking about the Western world. And, Israel is a little dot of Western civilization here in the Middle East. Europe, North America, and maybe a few other isolated spots in the world like Australia and New Zealand. Okay. But most of the world, I don't know. I don't know if people are becoming better. I don't know what's happening in Pakistan on a daily level. All right. I mean, or in Nigeria. And you could if you want to trace it all back to fundamentalist Islam, they definitely are in more places where there's more violence than anybody else in all their different forms. All right. But I don't know what's I mean, China doesn't look to me like some vanguard of human rights either. So I think there's a lot of places in the world where this is not yet true. So again, but we've got to control our arba mod, as we say, like our little, everybody in a democracy gets to control or thinks that we control or is led to believe that we can control, but let's pretend for a second that we can control, at least because we have elections, what's happening in our area that we're living in. And so, do we need to make a major switch here in this country in the head? Do we need to, instead of just destroying the house, and then this guy's going to get tons of money from the Palestinian Authority anyway, because he's a murderer, because that's what their society does, is laud murderers and laud violence. Okay. Do we need to start throwing these people out of here? Do we need to start, Hebron, where he came from? Does that entire neighborhood that he grew up in need to be, guys, you got 24 hours and you're out. Go to Gaza, go to Qatar. We really don't care. But you are defiling this place by what you're doing. I mean, is there something, I understand where you're going with this. Come down here with me into the mud for a second. Is there anything we can do as Israelis to see if we can push our leadership to take a stronger stand on what's happening here? So maybe there still will be victims, yes, but maybe there'll be fewer of them. Or maybe the message will be gotten from the other side that we're not putting up with this. This is not going to go just, we're going to just wake up tomorrow morning and go about our business. Do you see anything there that we could do? You and I are both Israelis who are going to be voting in a few months.
I think for sure these payments to Palestinian terrorists that are in Israeli jails for sure incentivizes behaviors like this. And that just needs to stop. They need to find a way to make that financially too painful for the PA to carry out. Mm-hmm. Like there has to be but one of the problems is the PA are a terrorist organization. Like yes, they're paying that money because they value what this guy did. Yep. They're paying that money because that money is the best money spent that they can have to achieve their goals. So that's a problem right there. There's a problem with the governmental organizations that we're dealing with, both the PA in Judea and Samaria and Hamas, the leaders of the Palestinians in Gaza. So we have to recognize who we're dealing with. As far as brutalizing the people on the ground, I just don't think that I don't think that sinks in. I think that increases the tribalistic tendencies that push forth this type of violence. I think that the Israeli government is actually handling the fact that we live in this area surrounded by 500 million people hostile to our very existence. I think they're doing a good job with that. Mm-hmm. Granted, one person being killed is unacceptable, but still one person it's better than two people.
Hmm.
And, the fact that they tracked this guy down, they found him so quickly,
Right.
we don't hear about all the ones that leave their house with a knife that
Are
don't make it
caught,
to their
which
victim,
is a lot. This is quite true.
which
This
is
is
a lot.
quite true. Yeah. Yeah.
And this is one of those things. We are here, we are we are here. We're not going anywhere, and we are making, I think, the best of a really horrific situation.
Yeah.
Could we be doing it any better? I don't know.
Hmm.
I don't know, but I suspect being more like them isn't the answer.
No, I'm not saying being more like them, but having a punishment that actually means something. I mean, we know this from parenting. Like if your kid isn't interested in watching television, so punishing them for not cleaning up their room by, okay, you're off the TV, it's not going to happen. Obviously, if you want to de incentivize, which I think is a great term that you used, behavior, you have to have the punishment or the threat of the punishment be something that'll resonate. Otherwise, it's worthless. And I'm not so sure that what we're doing right now, and also by propping up the Palestinian Authority or letting Hamas get all this money from Qatar, whatever's going on here, I think we're giving a lot of mixed messages. And maybe we can't do it any better because there is a realpolitik and there's a Europe that's anyhow boycotting us as much as they can. And there's all this other stuff happening here. But I wish there was some clear answer here, and there isn't. But there's one more thing I wanted to talk to you about. And I was, we're real friends, but we also are Facebook friends. They're not mutually exclusive.
What?
And I was yeah, I know, crazy, right? And I was following what was going on your page last night, which was that you chose to describe as much as you know how Ori was killed, as much as we know, and people are saying brutally murdered, but it goes far beyond that. And then there were other people like Paula Stern, for example, whom my listeners know. I interviewed her a couple of months ago, so she also weighed in on all this, and she was saying, "I'm defriending anybody who describes how she was killed." So there's a debate that happens here, and I think it's on a couple of different levels. Is talking about how somebody was killed, is it somehow wrong for the memory of the person? Like, should we leave a little bit of honor or a little bit of modesty, shall we say, for the dead person? And Judaism is very, very strict on how we relate to dead people, with tremendous honor and tremendous respect. It's considered one of the big mitzvot, like one of the greatest things you can do is give honor to somebody who's dead. They're not, because there's no payback involved here. This is one way, and this is truly the greatest kindness that you can do. So is it not a kindness to describe how she was killed, what her last moments were like? And there's also, leaving her aside because she doesn't care anymore, she's not there, her family. Is it more hurtful for her family when the world knows what was done to their daughter and how? I'm sorry.
It's okay.
And what her last moments must have been like, and the fear and everything. And then, though, there is the other side, the enemy. Do they get more impetus? Do they get, some wind in their sails, as you will, for, wow, look what he did. Isn't that amazing? Let's go do the same thing. So, there's different levels here and of how to deal with the details. So, I know your opinion. My listeners don't, though. So tell me, what you think and why you think that the details, it is important to put the details out.
So, Eve, I think overall there's what's called like a klal, a general rule that we should all be following on Facebook, and that's really to give other people the benefit of the doubt. Like, when you see something posted, like, what's the most charitable way that I could interpret this? Now, I get the position of someone like Paula Stern, and I've heard from several other
right.
high profile. I think they're all. Oh no, they're not all women. But several other high profile.
You have to be careful with that these days, right?
Right. Blog.
They
Right.
look like a woman, doesn't whatever. Yeah.
I think they all identify as women.
Yes. Okay.
And I understand the position of that this is a horrendous crime. We don't need to think about it. The details aren't important. What's important is there's this beautiful life that's been snuffed out way too soon by a deep evil in the world, and nothing more needs to be said. And even worse than that, it's going to get back to the family, and it's bad enough that a parent loses a child without having to go to the place where you have to have a visual of the horrific moments, that a little bit of lack of imagination or the space for a parent to not have to picture what those last moments must have been like is more important than any kind of Facebook post that can be shared.
Although the parents know. I mean, at least we know
all
that
of those
here
things.
in Israel.
I'm
They know
just
more
trying to say,
details that even get out. So
like, I think the people that were very, very upset with me for posting, for posting my post, I think that's what they would say. Yes, that's exactly what I was upset about, and I think that's a valid position to have, but I think there's also, and what I wish they would do is understand there's another valid position. I'll read to you how the Palestinian Information Center, which is one of the main Palestinian English language news sources, headlines it. Israeli settler found dead in occupied Jerusalem.
Right.
Right? So that is about
yeah.
All of that is true. That is a completely 100% true headline.
Well, I don't think it's occupied Jerusalem, but okay.
Okay.
From where they're coming from. Okay.
Okay. But the point is that you can say something that's true and remove context from it. I think it's important for people to know. And what I'm not asking people to be convinced of this. I want people to know, though, this is where I'm coming from. The post I shared said, another tragedy strikes Tekoa last night. A young woman who was a madricha, a youth counselor with my son at Bnei Akiva, was senselessly murdered by Palestinian Muslim terrorists. Her naked, partially beheaded body was left behind the Jerusalem Zoo. Her funeral is here in Tekoa at 1:30. Ori Ansbacher will forever be 19 years old. That was very intentional, the way I worded it, because you have to realize that she wasn't killed. She wasn't found dead. She was
slaughtered.
She was brutally and savagely murdered and sexually assaulted. And her last moments in this world were filled with fear and terror and pain. And the fact that we want to sanitize that to make our world seem a little bit more safe is something that I won't abide. That this is what we're facing with. This is what we're dealing with. And I think, as we talked about earlier in our conversation, we're dealing with it well as Israelis. We're going out. We have law enforcement. We have military enforcement that doesn't go and level the village that this animal came from, but using forensics, found him, caught him, brought him to justice. We went out, and even with the Morazines calling in the background, we buried this beautiful young girl with tears and sobbing, and we went home and we did what the Jewish people have been doing for thousands of years. We lit our candles. We lit our candles, and the hills of these mountains lit up with a light that was absent from here for thousands of years and is back. And no matter what they do, that light is not going to go out. So I get it. I get why people don't want to share that.
Well, I think it's not. Yeah, I think people don't want to share it, not because they want to sanitize our world, but again, out of respect for her and for her family, and not to drive the enemy to want to do this again.
I get
this is a tough. But then again, maybe we should be shocked. Maybe we do sanitize it too much and say, okay, like she died, and then we don't want to think about it because it's too horrific, and then we don't realize the evil that is among us. Look, this was a person who had a choice in doing what he did. Like you said, it wasn't a deer that ran in front of a car. This was a hunter who came out and made a decision to do this. And we need to know that this comes from a society that is educating and in every single way encouraging this kind of behavior. And if we end up thinking this is like a one-off psych guy, then we have a very big problem. And
No,
so,
even
but
even
I
a
don't know.
Ted
See, I don't
Bundy
know
like
where I
guy.
am on. Yeah, but so I
He's
don't know
not.
where I am on this. Like, I understand why you put it out, and we need to feel the horror. On the other hand, I do understand that if it's in any way going to hurt the family, we shouldn't do it. So, but I also understand that both ways need to be respected on the social media outlets. On people that because there is no answer here. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know.
And we also, in general, on social media, we have to be more care. And one of the feelings I got also from just the hostility of people towards this was the fact that we're all in pain. We're mourning as a
Yeah.
I've been watching the show on Netflix, Shtisel. Have you seen that?
Yeah, we did a Shtisel binge.
So,
We did a
but the
Shtisel
funny
binge a
part
couple
is,
months ago. It was an amazing show.
it's a national wide TV show,
Yeah.
right? It's
Right.
like the equivalent in America of, I don't know, pick a thing, Suits or
Right,
some
yeah.
nation. And you watch this show, and I'm like, I know that bookstore. I've been in that hotel lobby
Yeah.
a million times.
Right.
I knew 4 people in the so far. I'm only on episode 8, and like, oh,
Yeah.
there's my friend Pesach from Nachlod.
Yeah.
Oh, there's my son's
Right. Exactly.
assistant teacher. It's not a normal country. Nobody
No, it's
watches
not a normal
Seinfeld
country.
and at the outside of that diner and says, oh, there goes so and so. Oh, I know that. Like, no
Right.
Americans.
It's one large dysfunctional family here.
And it's a beautiful thing that we're all connected, but it's also a painful thing when we hurt. And when we hurt, I understand that people are looking for some sort of control and misdirected rage.
Right. We lash out at who we can
lash out at who we can. There was nobody to lash out at this girl's killing.
Right.
So I'm going to lash out at a way someone is expressing their grief that I don't agree with.
Right.
And for me, that's also a microcosm of what's important right now at this point in time where social media is relatively new, and you have to realize you have to give people the benefit of the doubt. And I get that we don't agree. It's okay that we don't agree. It's nice that we have a space that we cannot agree within, but we share this space, both virtual and physical, here in the land of Israel together.
All right. So we got to go. I mean, you've got your day, you've got work. I've got stuff to do today. Just going to get up and, pay a shiva call, go visit the family. And the rest of us get to, go back to whatever is normal in our daily world. There's another family for who normal will never be again. And a lot more gets buried in a grave than just the person. But a lot of hopes and dreams, and the family, never really recovers and goes in a different direction.
And it branches out. Where's
branches
the boy
out.
she's supposed to marry?
Yeah, exactly.
The grandchildren that we're supposed to have.
Right.
Bouncing on the knee. There's one last thing here,
Sure.
Eve, that I want to share. Ansbacher, or Ori's mother, made a statement last night, and I think it's worth it. She said,
"Please tell us."
I ask from those who are listening to us and for whom our words are entering their hearts to do one small thing to add light to the world. One act of kindness. Maybe we will preserve Ori's soul in the world. Maybe we'll have a little comfort by adding light to the world. The great Rabbi Rav Kook, you could that a little bit of darkness chases a lot of light away. And
a little bit of light changes a lot of darkness away.
Did I say that wrong? I totally blew that.
did.
All right,
It's okay.
but you got what I mean,
Yeah.
right? No amount of darkness in the world can withstand, adding.
And her name meant light.
And her
Ori meant
name
my light.
meant light. So there's a little less Ori in the world. There's a little less light in the world, and it's our job to.
So we
to
have
bring that
to
back
bring
into
it
place.
back. So I'm going to add to that everybody today, do some kindness or don't do something bad. Don't cut in traffic or help somebody across the street. And when you do that, more than you already do, because I know all my listeners are incredible people. But when you do that, just do it for her and for her memory, and that they will not win. The evil will not win. We are going to I say it all the time, make the light higher. And for this week, let's think about it in her memory and do the good things that she now will not have the opportunity to do. So we've got to pick that up for her. And that's on all of us to do that. So thank you, Mottle Wolf, for not an easy conversation. I appreciate you coming on this morning.
My pleasure.
And the conversation. And I hope that we never have to have this conversation again, that we just, So like when Mashiach came, did you hear the shofar blowing from Tekoa? Because, I heard it from Efrat, and it was amazing.
I saw it live streamed.
Yeah. It's okay. So let's have that conversation in the very near future. Okay, everybody. Eve Harrow, Rejuvenation on the Land of Israel Network. You can always write to me, eve@thelandofisrael.com. And thanks to Ben and to Tabitha and everybody who works so hard at the station to get our voices out there. I'll be back next week, hopefully, that we'll have just an incredible week of good things in this country and keep on going in the right direction all over the world. So take care, everybody. Goodbye for now.
The Land of Israel Network presents the Israel-inspired retreat, Rosh Chodesh Adar Bet, a 3-night event by the Dead Sea, Thursday through Sunday, March 7th through March 10th, 2019. Spend an unforgettable Shabbat with your hosts, Ari and Shana Abramowitz, Yishai and Malka Fleischer, Jeremy and Tehila Gimpel, and special guests. At the 5-star Royal Dead Sea Resort, uplifting prayers, dynamic lectures, inspiring Torah, one-on-one meetings with the hosts, a special women's program, children's camp and babysitters, guided meditation on the beach, live music and entertainment, exciting hikes and excursions. For more information, visit our special website, thelandofisrael.travel. That's thelandofisrael.travel for the Israel-inspired